Hey guys, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema. Today I'm going to be reviewing what has become very recently one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and that is John Carpenter's The Thing. I saw this for the first time a few months ago, and it was just one of those things where sometimes you watch a movie and you feel like that was really good, but in order for it to become one of my favorites, I'll probably have to see it a couple more times. Yeah, The Thing was not one of those. I instantly after I finished it knew that this is just going to become an all-time favorite for me. For the longest time, actually all I had seen from John Carpenter was his original Halloween film. A film I've always liked, but especially as I've started exploring John Carpenter's filmography a bit more, I've also come to appreciate the original Halloween a lot more as well. But to me, throughout all of the movies I watched from him, there's no film that demonstrates his strengths as a director more than The Thing. The Thing tells the story of a group of American researchers in Antarctica who discover the Thing, a parasitic extraterrestrial life form that assimilates then imitates other organisms. The group is overcome by paranoia and conflict as they learn that they can no longer trust each other and that any of them could be the Thing. It's basically if Among Us were a movie, but if it were also a masterpiece of psychological tension and cosmic horror. And I'll just say up front too, this is a movie where that it's actually pretty hard to talk about without getting into spoiler territory up front, just in terms of talking about the strengths of it. So if you haven't seen The Thing, I'm actually going to recommend that you click off this video right now, go watch it, and then come back. The film opens with an alien ship crashing into Antarctica, which some might see as a flaw because it kind of lets you know right away that it's an alien movie. But I actually think it works really well here because it's sort of Hitchcockian tension. That idea of telling the audience that there's a bomb in the room, even though the characters don't know. It's dramatic irony, basically. And the reason I would call it Hitchcockian tension is because what you see after this sort of opening alien sequence is very seemingly unrelated to that for a really good portion of the movie. You get introduced to this amazing group of characters. You have Kurt Russell, Keith David, Wilford Brimley, and a bunch of other quirky dudes. And then you also have the sequence with the Norwegian helicopter chasing this dog randomly. And so that all seems very separate from the alien scene at the start, and you're kind of piecing it together in your brain that you're like, okay, how are these things related? I'm a little bit nervous right now because of that, because it just seems very out of nowhere. It's a very strange sequence as both the characters and the audience are confused as to why the Norwegians are chasing this dog. And that question doesn't get answered very quickly because the Norwegians actually get violent and start attacking the Americans, trying to kill the dog still. So the Americans end up killing them. And so obviously they don't get the answers they're looking for. They just decide to take in this dog since, you know, it could be useful for them. And I've praised a lot of actors on my channel, a lot of performances, but honestly, one of my favorite performances of all time is this dog in The Thing. Certainly my favorite performance ever by an animal. Every time you see this dog staring out of a window or looking down a hallway or something like that, you just know something is off. You know something about this dog isn't quite right. And that helps build tension really well for a while. And eventually when it gets introduced to the other dogs that they have as like sled dogs or something in the camp, you realize, you know, the other dogs start turning on it really fast. They start barking on it. Seemingly they're just going, what is that thing? That is not a dog. The dogs notice that something is off even more than the humans do. And that's when we first see that this dog is the Thing. A creature from outer space that can transform into whatever it consumes. This sequence is one of my favorite in the movie, as it's the first time we get to see Rob Bottin's brilliant special effects. And they really do stick with you just because of how textured they are. Every layer of them that's eventually peeled back is just increasingly sickening, and it really does get under my skin. Unfortunately, when this movie came out, a lot of critics actually hated it, and I think a lot of it ironically actually had to do with the brilliant special effects, because though they're sparely used in the movie, they're very over the top, obviously, and there's just so much gore and everything. So a lot of critics just sort of viewed this movie as like a gore gross out fest as opposed to what it actually is, which is a really great psychological drama about these characters. For me, not only is this movie not just a, you know, gross out fest or something, but it's not even, the special effects aren't even what I find really scary about the movie. I went and rewatched this in a theater recently, and I think that was a great decision that I made because I haven't been this unsettled by a movie in a theater in a very, very long time. And as I was asking myself why, it really made sense when I thought about Carpenter's strengths as a director that I've seen throughout a lot of his other movies. Those strengths are, one, building a really effective horror atmosphere, particularly through music. He collaborated with this score on... he collaborated on this score with Ennio Morricone, who's a very famous like Western composer, did a lot of the Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns, and it's a very minimal score that occasionally incorporates some more classical elements to it. But again, that's sort of the thing that I think about when I think about the score is just that propulsive dun 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 dun, almost like a heartbeat that sort of just drives the tension throughout a lot of it. And the other thing is that Carpenter is just really good at creating a sense of apocalyptic dread for a lot of his horror movies. The Thing is actually part of his, what's referred to as his Apocalypse trilogy, which I talked about this in my previous video with Prince of Darkness. That's another part of it, a movie that does that tension really, really well. And also In the Mouth of Madness, which I actually haven't seen yet. One of my favorite scenes that captures this sense of dread is actually the one where Wilford Brimley is in the computer lab and he's looking at the computer and he's sort of analyzing the way that the Thing takes over other life forms. And the computer calculates that I think there's like a 75% chance that one or more of them has been infected by the Thing, which immediately creates a sense of like, oh fuck, there's still something going on here. But more than that, the computer also explains that if the Thing were to escape and get into the world population, it would take over the entire world population within a certain number of, I think it's like a few years or something like that. So essentially, if this Thing escapes, it has apocalyptic consequences for humanity. So even though this scene can be seen as kind of lazy because, you know, it's like a computer just delivering exposition in the way that like narration would or something like that, I really do like that there's like this cold, calculated quality to it that, one, fits the setting of the movie being in Antarctica, and two, just works as this really mean, nihilistic, apocalyptic sense of dread. It's a robot just, you know, explaining very carefully how fucked we are as a species, sitting very precariously in this massive universe that could contain things that we can't even fathom. And that's really what's scariest to me about this movie, is more the cosmic horror as opposed to just the gore effects and things like that. But also how the cosmic horror sort of affects these central characters and the way that they interact with one another. For one, they're already isolated in Antarctica where, you know, nobody can rescue them if something goes wrong. But then it starts to hit these characters that even if somebody can rescue them, that's probably not a good thing, because then the Thing will likely just infect whoever's rescuing them, and that will spread to the rest of the world. They've realized the apocalyptic consequences of their discovery, their scientific discovery. And that's when you slowly start to see these characters turn on each other. As again, a lot of this movie is kind of like Among Us. It's just like characters suspecting one another of being the Thing. There's so many set pieces that are used to execute this idea of not knowing who's the Thing. Too many to talk about in this review, but my favorite is probably the blood test set piece, which is not only just great tension, especially between Kurt Russell and Keith David's characters, but it also leads to one of the greatest executed jump scares in the history of movies, which then of course leads into another sort of gore, gross out set piece. But yeah, that is just an amazing scene. All of this turning on each other ultimately just leads to their own destruction as more of them start getting infected by the Thing and dying. And Kurt Russell in particular starts to realize that there's not really a way where they're going to get out of this situation alive. And this eventually prompts him to just say fuck it and just blow everything up at the camp, which hopefully will kill the Thing. And what I love about this is that there's no way for Kurt Russell to be sure that blowing everything up is going to kill the Thing. It seems to be very resilient. But he just decides to do it anyway because there's nowhere else he can go. It's very, you know, claustrophobic and sort of trapped in. So after he's blown everything up and he sort of survived the explosion and everything, he got far enough away from it. This leads to one of the most iconic endings in the history of horror, where he and Keith David sort of meet up and just start talking for a couple minutes. They ultimately just decide to wait it out and kind of see what happens for a bit, because like I was talking about, there's still no way for either of them to know that the other one is not the Thing. And there's no way for us to know this either. I was actually watching an interview with Tarantino where he was talking about the Thing, and he said that the reason that he thought he was really scared of it was that it takes this feeling that the characters have towards one another of sort of, accusatory panic, and it then, at the end of the movie, directs that at the audience because, there's nowhere else for this tension to go other than outward, which I thought was a really cool idea and definitely explains the effect that I think this film has on a lot of people. So yeah, I don't know why it took me 22 years of my life to see it, but if you have waited a long time and you haven't seen The Thing, my God, what are you doing? This Thing is a 5-star movie all day. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time at this point. I think I'm just going to appreciate it more and more over time. I got the Blu-ray recently, so looking forward to watching that. It's a great movie to watch at this time of the year. It really is one of the best horror movies ever made. That's going to do it for this video. If you like this, please like it down below, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you want. I've got more content coming out soon. Should be reviewing Halloween Ends pretty soon. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.